Hi, guys. Today we're going to do the 6 C's of analyzing a primary source. First of all, some of you that had me for civics, this is just going to be a review for you. So please pay attention very closely and we'll be rocking and rolling on this assignment together. First of all, what is a primary source? So let's take a look real quick at this little mini documentary that tells you exactly what a primary source is.
You can't create historical drama or historical fiction without historical research. You can't do historical research without digging up some primary sources. These guys. Captain Phillips, Saving Private Ryan, 12 Years a Slave, Zero Dark 30. People actually had to do research when they were writing those awesome scripts. Primary sources are original materials that were created during the time being studied or by someone with first-hand knowledge of the event. So let's break it down. Original means the source was created by someone actually living in the period we're studying. So if we're studying World War II, an original material would be the diary of a soldier. He wrote it himself and he was actually in the war. It originated in that time period. Materials means that primary sources take different forms. It could be a letter, a painting, even a toy. Then there's the created during the time being studied part. Well, a newspaper article about World War II that was written yesterday would not be a primary source because it was written 70 plus years after the event. A little hindsight there. But just to make it confusing, primary sources can be written after the event as long as it was created by somebody with first-hand knowledge, which means primary sources could include memoirs, letters, or interviews that were made after the event if the person making them was actually there at the time, like our WW2 vet. Okay, what isn't a primary source? Well, anything written about the past that wasn't written at that time or wasn't written by someone with first-hand knowledge of the event. The secondary sources are usually texts that use a bunch of primary sources to make an argument or to interpret the past. So let's say you're writing a paper and need to use primary and secondary sources. You collect interviews from WW2 vets, documents from government officials describing their decisions and actions, film footage from the front, and a book published by a history professor in 2014 about World War II. Well, the interviews, documents, and film footage would all be primary sources. The book published in 2014 would be a secondary source. Okay, we're going to hit you with some types of primary sources. Text, not the OMG LOL kind. Anything that's written down, like diaries, personal letters, or published works like books or newspapers. Images, anything visual, paintings, doodles, photographs, posters, tapestries, whatever. Recordings, although recordings only go back 150 years or so, we've got recordings of music, oral histories, interviews, TV shows, radio programs, and films that literally speak to us about the past. Objects, this pretty much covers everything else. Clothes, toys, coins, tools, pottery, and anything else you can think of that was made in the past. All right, well, so according to this definition, couldn't anything that ever existed be a primary source? Well, sort of. But keep in mind, the further back in history you go, the less likely you are to find primary sources that have survived. Texts deteriorate, and writing didn't always exist. We're more likely to have old images or objects, but they also deteriorate. So while we might have a ton of stuff from the recent past, our primary sources get more and more rare as we move further back in history, and our ability to construct a picture of the past gets a little fuzzy. Okay, but where in the world are all these things kept? There's some sort of secret warehouse in Area 51 where we find them. Does the NSA have a massive database of every sound ever made in the past 150 years? But no. Objects can be found in archives, museums, or personal collections. But fortunately, you don't have to travel the world visiting all these places or breaking into private residence. There's a very convenient way of finding primary sources. The internet. Well, there are millions and millions of primary sources that have been digitized and put on the internet. Primary sources are the key to uncovering an accurate picture of the past. Without them, you could make up any story you wanted about history. Maybe Lincoln would have looked better as a blonde.
Fourscore and 7 months ago. What did the buffalo say to his son as he left for school?
Bye, son. Like that joke, but if you survived it, how about clicking the subscribe button below?
Bye, son. That was funny. I forgot that was there. That was funny. All right. So the cool thing about primary sources is I think the interview part, just think 10, 15 years from now, when people are talking about this COVID-19 situation, you all will be primary sources. And I think that's exciting. So maybe someday when you're, when you're 30 and you have kids and they come home and they say, Mom, Dad, we have to do a report on COVID-19. You can help them out and you can be that primary source to, walk them through it, feel how, just get, give them the feeling of how it is that, you did your learning from home and you were locked in, you had to wear a mask and the sports were a little, were confined. And that to me, that's going to be really cool. Someday you'll be a primary source. Whenever you're doing a report for school, it is really cool thing to put in a primary source of something. Let's say you have to do something on Vietnam. Ask your grandpa and grandma if they lived during that time period of Vietnam, and add something like a quote or a story from them. I used to do that all the time with my parents. They lived through the Depression. My dad was in the Korea, and, that kind of stuff. And so whenever I had to do a report that I knew my parents lived through that time period, I always asked them, a question about it. It just actually it made it for a good conversation. So let's move on. Enough rambling from me. Now, how do you break it down? How do you break down these 6 C's? And it's not breakdown like, woohoo, let's do a dance breakdown. It's how are you going to look at a primary document and break it down into the 6 C's? The 6 C's are, first one is content. What is the main point of this primary document? Okay, for example, what is the content of the Hammurabi's Code? Hammurabi's, is one of my favorites. Okay, and the idea that a legal code is written down, and Hammurabi wanted to make sure that if you did something wrong, that there would be injustice for the person that was injured, and then the person that did the crime would have to pay some type of damages for their crime. And it's usually an eye for eye justice. If you stole something, you lost your hand, kind of thing. So that, you're looking for the content. What is the main idea, the main purpose of that document? Then you go to citation. Who is the author? When was it written? Okay, for example, Justinian's Code, Emperor of the Eastern European Empire, or what we would call the Byzantine Empire, Justinian. Okay, he wrote it, and he wrote it between the ages of 529 and 565 AD, or CE for some of you. And then context. What was going on in the world when this document was written. Okay, so you have your document over here, but hey, what was going on and what else was going on in the world? All right, so let's look at that Justinian Code. When he was writing the Justinian Code, okay, the Roman Republic was up. The Dewey Decimal System was being put into place. Justinian ruled the Byzantine Empire, and the birth of Muhammad. That all happened during the time the Justinian Code was written. Now, an easy way to find this would be to Google timelines. And so when you find the date of your document, then go into Google and then do a good 10-year timeline. So let's say your document was written in 600, then I'd go into Google and Google a timeline from 600 to 610. And then if you don't think you have enough information, then go 625. Okay, so literally you got to play with it a little bit. There's no specific time frame that they're looking for when it was written. They just wanted to know what was going on in the world Okay, Justinian Code was written over here, but hey, what was going on over here at the same time? I hope you can understand that. If you don't understand that, give me an email. Connection. This one's the fun one. Making a connection with your prior knowledge with something you already know of with the primary document. For example, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, okay, they wrote Exodus, the book of Exodus, okay? And sometimes we look at things that we see on TV or things that we see in movies or things that we read or things that you experience, and you can connect that with the like one of those aha moments. You're connecting it with the document. So if you are reading the Old Testament, the Bible is considered a primary source. Okay, you're reading about the Ten Commandments and the Hebrews leaving Egypt to go to what is now called Israel for freedom. And so when you're reading that primary document, what could be your connection? And some of you might have a connection to CCD or Sunday school or Bible school or something. Perfectly, write it down. Okay. I personally have what I would call a funny connection to it. And I know sometimes people don't like to look at the Bible with humor, but sometimes that's how I remember what I've read in the Bible, is put a little humor to it. So I hope you like my connection to Exodus's sorry for my mispronunciation, Leviticus and Deuteronomy's version of Exodus.
Moses went to the mountain, and God spoke unto him.
Moses, this is the Lord thy God, commanding you to obey my law. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. I'm definitely to hear you.
What?
Nothing, and finish and forget it. Oh Lord, why have you chosen me? What would you have me do for you?
I shall give you my laws, and you shall take them unto the people.
Yes, Lord. Lord, I shall give these laws unto thy people. Hear me. Oh, hear me. Oh, pay heed. The Lord Jehovah has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
Okay, for those people that are wondering and scratching your head or rolling your eyes back, that is from the movie called History of the World Part 1 by Mel Brooks. And if you don't know who Mel Brooks is, if you've ever seen the movie Spaceballs, which I know is a common movie on Netflix, a real popular movie on Netflix, it is really funny. I wish I could show you the History of the World Part 1, but there's a lot of things that are not school appropriate in it, so I can't show it to you. But it sure is funny, and if you get your parents' permission to watch it, feel free to do so. You will get a lot of connections of what we've been going over in the first part of world history in Liz land. So let's move on. Then you have communication. Is the document a reliable source? Is the point of view biased? So if you were looking at the Mayflower Compact, which was the document that the Pilgrims wrote to govern when they first landed in what is now called the United States, when you read it, it's very biased towards women. Very biased towards women. They forget to mention women at all in the document when they settled here, again, in what we call the United States. That is not uncommon for a document that is written prior to the 20th century. But that one, it just really basically, made the women feel left out, and which was sad because they could not have survived without the women who came with them over on the Mayflower. And then the conclusion: how does a primary source contribute to your understanding of history? And how I like conclusions would be getting that personal story from somebody that lived during that time. Now I know it's hard when the time period that we're studying because people aren't alive, but you can read diaries and get an idea of how Justinian felt while he was ruling the Byzantine Empire, or a member of one of the African kingdoms, and and see if they have something to say in writing. And Mohammed wrote a lot about his experiences, and so literally that little piece of primary source from somebody that was alive during that time is fantastic. And so what I chose for you as an example is a Holocaust survivor telling their stories. And my dad and I were, he was, and I am a Holocaust historian. And we spent time talking to Holocaust survivors. And it's very important to get their stories down because someday, very soon, we're going to be hearing that the last survivor has passed away. And we're not going to have those stories. So let's listen to this woman and her story of being able to survive.
Facing the entrance to Auschwitz-Birkenau, seated alongside the railway line that delivered multitudes, mostly Jews, in cattle.
Sorry, guys. My bad. That's okay. I'm gonna keep this boo-boo in because it's not that bad. I'm sorry. You know me, technology.
Mostly Jews in cattle trucks to their deaths. Survivors shared their stories.
In Auschwitz-Birkenau, I remember naked women driven in trucks from the barracks to a gas chamber. I can hear them screaming. I can hear it in my subconscious when I remember those events.
World leaders, royalty, and religious leaders listened. This was not a moment for them.
And there was this dream within my heart. It was still alive. Maybe tomorrow will come one day. And tomorrow did come indeed. Memories remained though.
75 years after the liberation of Auschwitz, scene of some of the worst atrocities of the Holocaust, the deaths of more than 1 billion people, this was an occasion vivid with memory and resonant with emotion. The pain of those who lived through it, and heartache for those who did not. But above all, another opportunity for some, perhaps the last, to repeat the mantra of a lifetime: never again.
War blurs the lines between good and evil. To avoid that, there must be reconciliation between nations. Therefore, it is a moral obligation for all those present here to act in such a way that nothing like that ever happens again.
This may be the last major anniversary at which survivors turn up in significant numbers. Some have come here, they say, to refresh their own memories of what they lived through. Others to say goodbye to family and friends whose ashes were scattered across the fields as fertilizer. Most, though, when they speak, do offer the hope that even when they are gone, the world does not forget. Jonah Hull, Al Jazeera, at Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp in...
Did you notice the older gentleman in the front row? He was wearing the blue and kind of gray striped cap, and then there was another gentleman that was wearing it when he was speaking. That one, they kept that from when they were in Auschwitz, and so that's an actual artifact. And so if you were doing some research on the Holocaust and you came upon an artifact, you can write about the condition of it and the smell of it and the relevance of it in whatever you are doing. So it's very important, those primary sources. You remember my artifact I told you about when my mom borrowed a piece of the Great Pyramid. Okay, that's a primary source. That piece of the Great Pyramid is a primary source. And so if I ever write again on as a historian about that time period in history, I have a piece of it with me that I can write about and add that experience into my writing. And it just makes it more in depth, more feeling to it with your writing. So that's just a helpful hint from an old history teacher. Now, applying your knowledge. What are you going to do? What I want you to do is I want you to read a document that you're familiar with, okay, in order for you to practice the 6 C's. And all of you should be familiar with the Declaration of Independence. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to the website, and on the website there's a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and I just want you to read it over. It's very short, actually, for a primary document. And then I want you to apply the 6 C's to this primary document, okay? It's super easy to do. There's a form for you to follow. If you need to look over the PowerPoint available for you as you're going, fantastic. Or if you need to rewind the video to get clarification, perfectly fine. And then if you still are having problems applying the 6 C's, I want you then to email myself or Mr. Bowers, and we're more than welcome to help you with this assignment. Now, this assignment is due today, okay? So it is due on Wednesday. And you have to submit it through your Google form that's available for you on the website. If you do not fill out your Google form during the time period of school, then you're going to be considered absent. So please make sure you just go in, fill out the form, look at, you're taking the Declaration of Independence here, and then your 6 C's form over here, and you're just reading it and filling it in as you go. Okay. And after, please remember I said once before that you need to fill out that Google form. Okay. Now remember, I love you so much and I miss you. Believe me, I love Mr. Bowers, but you know what? I really do miss teaching you guys every day. But he's doing a damn good job. I think he's doing a really good job. So remember, stay safe, healthy, and remember, I love you. And get to work and get some of that makeup work done.